My name is Claire. I am 36 years old, and just a year ago I thought I was living a quiet, ordinary life as a wife, a part-time designer, and a woman who had it all figured out. I loved my husband. I trusted him with every corner of my heart. I thought we were building something real, stable, honest, but nothing prepares you for the moment you realize you've been living in someone else's lie. It started on a Tuesday. He walked in earlier than usual, his tie loosened, his jacket slung over his shoulder like a man defeated. He looked at me and said, "Claire, I lost my job." And I believed him. Of course I did. I held him. I told him we'd get through it together, that I'd cover things until he got back on his feet. What I didn't know was, he wasn't falling. He was simply shifting into a second life, one I didn't know existed. It took me 6 months, 6 months of fake interviews, strange receipts, missing weekends, and late-night whispers I wasn't meant to hear. Until one day, I got an envelope in the mail, a beautiful cream-colored invitation with golden letters. "You are invited to the wedding of Daniel and Melissa." My husband's name was Daniel. This is how I found out, not with a confession, not with a fight, but with an invitation. And this is my story, not his, not hers, mine, her broken story. It was raining that evening, one of those slow, stubborn rains that feels like it's trying to wash something away. I was in the kitchen, barefoot, heating soup, when I heard the front door open, not slam like usual, just open quietly, almost nervously. "Daniel," I called out. No answer at first. Then I saw him standing in the hallway, soaked from the waist down, his shoes leaving wet footprints on the hardwood floor. His face looked different, paler, hollow. He dropped his bag by the door, ran a hand through his hair, and let out a long, heavy breath. "Claire, we need to talk." I turned the stove off instantly. My heart did that weird, fluttering thing it does when you know something bad is coming, but you're not ready to face it. He sat down at the table like someone carrying invisible weight. His eyes avoided mine. And then he said it. Soft, controlled, almost rehearsed. "They let me go today. Downsizing. Corporate shakeup. I didn't see it coming." I stared at him, trying to understand. Daniel was one of the most reliable people I knew. He worked late, came in on weekends, took calls during dinner. He wasn't the kind of man who got let go. At least, not without a fight. "What happened?" I asked gently, sitting across from him. "Did they give you notice? Severance?" He shook his head. "Just 2 weeks' pay, that's all." I reached for his hand. "Okay," I said. "Then we make it work. We adjust. We've been through worse." He gave me a tight smile, one of those half-hearted, thanks for trying kinds of smiles, and nodded. That night, he barely touched his food. He went to bed early, turned his back to me, and fell asleep in seconds, or at least pretended to. I lay there staring at the ceiling, telling myself over and over, he's just in shock. He's processing. Give him space. But something about that night didn't sit right with me, and I didn't know it yet, but that uneasiness in my chest, it wasn't fear. It was the very first whisper of betrayal, the first ripple in what would become a storm. The first week after Daniel lost his job, he stayed home, mostly in sweatpants, mostly on the couch, mostly silent. He said he needed time to think, to reset, to figure out his next move. I understood. I even encouraged it. "Take a breath," I told him. "You've been working non-stop for years. Maybe this is life telling you to slow down." But he didn't slow down. Not really. By the second week, something changed. He started leaving the house again, said he had interviews, meetings, networking lunches. At first, I was proud. I packed him sandwiches, wished him luck, kissed him on the cheek like always. But something felt off. He never came back with business cards, never mentioned who he met. When I asked how things went, he'd shrug and say, "They'll call me." No details, no excitement, no frustration, just blank. One night I noticed he smelled different, not like cologne, but like a place, faint perfume in the collar of his jacket, a trace of wine on his breath. "How was lunch?" I asked, trying to sound casual. He didn't even look up. "Fine." Then he pulled out his phone and scrolled, as if the question didn't matter. I told myself I was being paranoid, that it was the stress, the change, the fear of the unknown, that he needed space, but the truth was, I was shrinking inside my own marriage. He wasn't angry, he wasn't cold. He just wasn't there. Not really. He used to ask me how my day was. Now he didn't even notice when I cut my hair. And worst of all, he smiled more when he looked at his phone than when he looked at me. That's when I started checking the clock. Not for when he'd leave, but for how long he'd be gone. It was a Thursday when I opened his laptop. Not to spy. At least that's what I told myself. But he had left it open on the kitchen counter, screen glowing. And curiosity. It's louder when your heart feels ignored. There were no job applications, no open resumes, just YouTube videos and a weather tab for a city 3 hours away. A city he had never mentioned. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, frozen. I didn't type, I didn't click, I just closed it, quietly, but something inside me cracked open that night. I started noticing patterns. He left the house dressed nicer than usual. Button-downs I hadn't ironed. Shoes I hadn't seen him wear in years. He was always just stepping out, but never gave me a time. Never answered texts right away. And when he did, it was always short. "Meeting. Call you later. Can't talk." Once I called him at 2 p.m. just to ask what he wanted for dinner. He didn't pick up. A minute later, he texted, "In a meeting." But that same minute, I saw him active on Instagram, liking a photo. I remember sitting there at the kitchen table, phone in my hand, bowl of soup going cold. I stared at the screen, at his little green dot, and I felt invisible. I wanted to be wrong. I wanted there to be an explanation. So I did what any hopeful woman does when denial starts to slip. I looked for proof that I was just imagining it. I checked his laundry, his wallet, his trash. I told myself, if you're wrong, you'll feel guilty for doubting him. But deep down, I was hoping I wasn't wrong. Because if I was right, at least I wasn't crazy, at least my loneliness had a name. And soon, I would find her. I wasn't looking for evidence that day. I was just paying bills, or so I told myself. Daniel had left his wallet on the kitchen table, next to his keys and a half-empty coffee mug. Something about the way it was sitting there, carelessly open, made me pause. I picked it up slowly, my hands already shaking, as if part of me knew what I was going to find. Inside was a folded receipt. I unfolded it with the kind of dread usually reserved for test results. Dinner for 2. At a restaurant we'd never been to together. In that same city his weather tab had shown. A bottle of wine, dessert, flowers delivered to the table. It wasn't a business lunch. It was a date. I sat down in silence, holding the receipt like it might burn me. My eyes scanned the timestamp. Last Friday night. That night, he told me he was meeting an old friend from college to talk job leads. He came home at midnight, said the friend was going through a divorce and needed support. Liar. I placed the receipt on the table like it was a crime scene photo. Everything inside me wanted to scream, to confront him, to throw the truth in his face. But instead, I just sat there. Because there's a moment right after you catch a lie when you realize this is no longer a suspicion. This is real. And once it becomes real, you can't unknow it. You can't go back to normal. And worst of all, you can't tell anyone. Because what if you forgive him? What if you pretend it never happened? What if you're not ready to burn down the house you spent 12 years building? So I folded the receipt, and I put it back in his wallet, exactly where I found it, and I smiled when he got home that night, just like always, because I wasn't ready to explode. Not yet. First, I needed to know how deep the lie really went. It started subtly, one weekend here, another there. I need to meet with a recruiter, he'd say, or there's a tech conference I can't miss. I nodded every time, because I wanted to believe him, because believing him was easier than facing what I already knew. But patterns always reveal themselves. You just have to stop pretending you don't see them. The first time he was gone overnight, I asked if I could come along, make it a getaway. He smiled too fast and said, "It's really just work, Claire. Boring, trust me." So I stayed home, made soup, washed sheets, waited. The second time, he didn't even tell me until the morning he left. A last-minute thing, he said, an opportunity. He left in such a rush he forgot to take his charger, or maybe he didn't care. That weekend, I didn't hear from him at all. Not a single call, just a "made it there safely" text, then silence. And yet, I didn't text him either. I couldn't explain it, but something inside me had gone still, like a deep part of me had gone quiet just to listen. And in that silence, I began to hear everything I'd been ignoring. On Sunday evening, I was folding laundry when his suitcase caught my eye. He'd left it behind the door. Open, inside, a shirt I'd never seen before. Black silk, expensive looking. And perfume. Not mine. It wasn't a scent from the air. It was in the fabric, soaked into the collar. I pressed the shirt to my nose and felt something shift in my chest. Not pain, not rage, clarity. This was no fling. This was a routine. I wasn't the wife anymore. I was the layover, the waiting room, and someone else was his destination. It was a Tuesday afternoon when my phone rang. I almost didn't answer. It was an unknown number, but something told me to pick up. "Hi, is this Claire?" Her voice was soft, young, hesitant. I hesitated too. "Yes, who's this?" There was a pause, the kind of pause that stretches too long to be harmless. "I'm sorry, this is probably going to sound strange, but are you Daniel's wife?" Time slowed. My grip tightened. My throat dried. I answered quietly, "Yes, why?" Another pause, then a breath, then her voice, almost a whisper. "He told me he was divorced." I didn't speak. I couldn't. My pulse roared in my ears. He said his wife left him, that she cheated, that she was toxic, and he was rebuilding. I felt something inside me go cold. Not broken, just cold. She continued, her voice cracking. "I'm sorry, I didn't know, I swear I didn't. I found a card in his drawer. With your name. That's how I found your number. I thought you should know." I wanted to scream, to accuse, to tell her she was part of the lie. But instead, I said the only thing I could. "Thank you for calling." She went silent, and then the line went dead. I sat there in my kitchen, phone still in hand, staring at nothing. I should have cried. I should have collapsed. But all I felt was calm. Not peace, not yet, but the kind of calm that comes right before you make a decision. The kind of calm that says, I know what I have to do now, and I'm going to do it. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't even go to bed. I sat on the couch in silence, my arms wrapped around my knees, staring into the dark like it could give me answers. Her voice, the girl on the phone, kept echoing in my head. He told me he was divorced. How many times had I defended him? How many times had I silenced my own instincts just to protect the image I had of him? Of us. By sunrise, something had hardened inside me. I needed to know everything. Not just the lies I could guess, the ones he told with his eyes and his silences, but the full truth, all of it. No more hoping, no more waiting for him to hand it to me. So I followed him. It was a Friday. He said he had a second-round interview out of town and wouldn't be back until late. I watched him leave. Button down, clean shave, confident stride. Same lie. New audience. I gave him 30 minutes, then grabbed my keys and followed. I didn't even need GPS. I knew which highway he'd take. I'd memorized it from his calendar, the one I was never supposed to see. It took 2 hours. 2 hours of gripping the wheel so tight my fingers ached. 2 hours of rehearsing what I would do if I found him with her. And then I did. The address led me to a quiet neighborhood. Neat lawns, wind chimes, happy little mailboxes, and parked right in front of a cream-colored townhouse was his car. I didn't knock. I didn't scream. I didn't explode. I just stood across the street, watching, shaking, hoping for a second that maybe he was just helping a friend. Maybe I was wrong. And then I saw her. She stepped outside laughing. He followed. They kissed, casually, like they'd done it 1,000 times. He placed his hand on the small of her back, like he used to do with me when we first fell in love. Like I no longer existed. And maybe I didn't. Not to him. He had built a new life, a new story, a new lie with legs and lipstick. My knees almost gave out. But I didn't fall. I turned, got back in my car, and drove. Not home. Not yet. I needed to feel what it meant to lose something. To finally stop pretending I hadn't already lost it long ago. And somewhere between mile marker 117 and the gas station where I cried into a bathroom sink, I realized this wasn't just betrayal, it was erasure. He didn't just cheat on me, he replaced me. And now it was time to replace the version of myself that let him. I thought I'd scream when I saw them. I thought I'd march across the street, tear into him, yell every word I had swallowed for months, but I didn't. There was something worse than rage growing inside me, something colder, sharper, and suddenly I didn't want a scene. I wanted clarity. I wanted strategy. So I went home, quietly. No smashed dishes, no accusatory texts. I made dinner that night, like always. When he walked through the door at 10:43 p.m., he smelled like her, like perfume and red wine and deception wrapped in charm. He kissed my cheek, told me the interview went well, said they'd be in touch soon. I smiled. That's wonderful, I said. You deserve it. I looked him in the eye, steady, calm, measured. Because here's the thing, no one tells you. When a man hides something from you, it gives you power. He thinks you're blind, but really you're invisible. And invisibility is a weapon. Over the next few weeks, I learned everything. Where she lived, what coffee she liked, the name of her dog, her birthday, their favorite restaurant, their fake meet-cute story. Every detail he crafted to make their world seem real. I watched it all unfold like a bad play, and I was the unseen audience. He didn't even notice I'd stopped asking about job leads, stopped checking in, Stop touching him. He was too busy building a future with her. A future made of my silence. But silence doesn't mean surrender. It means the storm is gathering. And I was done being his cover. I didn't confront him. I documented everything. I printed receipts, took screenshots, backed up photos, even recorded one of his calls by accident, or so he thought. And then one morning, an envelope arrived in the mail. Gold edges, elegant font, an invitation to their wedding, addressed to me, as if I didn't exist and still needed to be reminded. Her name was Melissa. I found it on the wedding invitation, written in delicate script next to Daniel's name, like they were already a fairy tale. Daniel and Melissa, as if I were the forgotten prologue to their perfect beginning. At first, I hated her. The way one woman is taught to hate another when a man steps out. It's easier that way, isn't it? Easier to blame the stranger with the smile than the man with your last name. But I needed more than a name. So I searched. LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook. Her digital life unfolded like a glossy magazine. Perfectly filtered photos, brunches with friends, motivational captions, pictures of dogs and daffodils. A carefully arranged life. She worked in PR. Of course she did. She knew how to make things look right from the outside. She posted photos with Daniel. Not recently. No, she was careful. But tagged ones from friends, hidden in the background. They were there, and what hit me hardest wasn't her beauty. It was her eyes. There was something in them I recognized. Something I remembered seeing in my own reflection 10 years ago. Softness, hope, a belief that she mattered. That's when it hit me. She didn't take him from me. He took pieces of me and gave them to her. The way he used to look at me like I was the only woman in the room. Now he gave her that gaze. The jokes we used to share, he recycled them. Our rituals, our road trip playlists, our late-night snack runs, repackaged and re-gifted. Melissa wasn't my enemy. She was my ghost, living my old life, wearing my memories like borrowed clothes. And the worst part? She thought she was special, just like I did. But eventually, she'd learn, because men like Daniel don't stop lying when they find someone new. They just upgrade their performance, and if she was smart, she'd run. But I wasn't going to warn her. That's not my story to save anymore. I had my own ending to write. The envelope was thick, luxurious, cream-colored with gold edges, heavy in the hand, like it knew what it carried. My name was printed in a delicate, cursive font, Claire Matthews. Not Mrs., not guest, not even former. Just Claire, as if that was all I'd ever been. Inside, the card read, "Together with their families, Daniel Michels and Melissa Grant request the honor of your presence at their wedding celebration." I read it 3 times. Honor of your presence, as if I should be grateful to witness it, as if I hadn't built the man she was about to marry. Fed him, supported him, believed in him when no one else did. The wedding was to take place at a coastal vineyard, the same one Daniel and I had once dreamed of renewing our vows at. I had shown it to him in a magazine 5 years ago. He said it was too expensive. I guess it wasn't too expensive now. I sat there in my kitchen, holding the card with trembling hands. I wasn't angry, not at first. I was humiliated. He invited me. He actually thought I would come, smile politely, sit through the ceremony like a ghost in the back row. Maybe even bring a gift. No apology, no conversation, no closure, just an invitation, a declaration. "I've replaced you." I should have torn it up. I should have screamed. Instead, I placed the card back in its envelope, slid it into my drawer, and closed it gently. Because now I knew something he didn't. I was going to that wedding, not to stop it, not to beg or cry or fall apart, but to remind him, and everyone else, that I wasn't a footnote, I was the headline. And when I walked in, he'd finally see what it looks like when the woman he erased comes back in full color. I held it together for exactly 3 days after the invitation arrived. 3 days of smiling at coworkers. 3 days of cleaning a house that no longer felt like mine. 3 days of pretending I didn't feel like I was drowning in someone else's fairy tale. But it only takes one wrong word to break the dam. It happened in the grocery store. A woman I barely knew saw me in the frozen aisle and said, "You always look so calm. I wish I had your life." And I laughed. Laughed too loud, too sharp. It startled her. She stepped back, unsure of what she'd touched. I apologized. Made something up about a bad day, but when I got home, I dropped the bag of groceries in the middle of the kitchen floor and just stopped. I looked around, at the photos on the wall, the dishes in the sink, the wedding ring still sitting in the little dish by the stove, and something inside me snapped. I screamed, not words, just sound, raw and ugly. The kind of sound you make when grief and rage and humiliation all collide in your throat. I ripped the photo of our anniversary trip off the fridge, tore the receipt from our first dinner together in half. I smashed a wine glass, the last one from the set we got at our wedding, and then I collapsed, right there on the kitchen floor, surrounded by broken glass and the scent of something that used to mean celebration. I cried until there was nothing left. No more tears, no more shaking, just breath, shallow, ragged breath. That's when I saw my reflection in the oven door, hair messy, eyes swollen, makeup smeared. But underneath all of that, I saw something I hadn't seen in a long time. A woman, not a wife, not a placeholder, not someone waiting for the next betrayal. A woman who had survived the lie, who had watched her world fall apart and still stood back up. That night, I threw out the rest of the wine glasses, took off my ring, deleted his contact from my phone, and I made a decision. If I was going to break, I was going to break open, and what came out would not be quiet. The next morning, I woke up to silence, but it wasn't the hollow, heavy silence I'd grown used to, the kind that fills the house when someone you love has already left in spirit. No. This silence was different. It was mine. I stood in front of the mirror, looked at the woman staring back at me, and whispered, "I'm still here." I didn't recognize her entirely yet. Not without the ring, not without the soft mask of denial she'd worn for so long. But she was familiar, and she was tired of being small. I started small. I packed a box, not of his things, but of mine. Things I loved but hadn't touched in years. My sketchbook, my old camera, the turquoise scarf I stopped wearing because he once said it looked too bright. Then I booked an appointment at the salon, chopped off 5 inches of hair, not for a trend, not for attention, for control. When the stylist turned me toward the mirror, I didn't smile right away. I just stared, and then I thought, that woman could walk into a room and make him sweat. I signed up for a yoga class the same day. My body ached. I could barely hold a pose, but there was a moment, lying in stillness, palms open to the ceiling, where I felt weightless, like I had finally let go of carrying a man who never once carried me. At night, I started journaling again. The words didn't come easily at first. They stumbled, unsure of themselves. But each sentence was a stitch, sewing parts of me back together. I changed my phone background, cleared my saved playlists, lit candles, played music I loved, not the kind he said gave him a headache. And little by little, the house started to feel like home again. Not because he was gone, but because I was coming back. There was no grand gesture, no one watching, no applause. Just a woman quietly rebuilding herself, piece by piece, breath by breath. And when I looked at that wedding invitation again, still sitting in the drawer, I didn't feel broken. I felt ready. Let them have their big day. I had something better. My beginning. The morning of the wedding, I woke up without an alarm. There was no panic, no second thoughts, just a strange calm. The kind that settles in when you know you've already survived the worst part. I took my time getting ready. Not to impress anyone, not to compete, but to honor myself. I chose a dress I'd bought years ago but never had the courage to wear. Sleek, elegant, black as truth. I put on red lipstick, not for seduction, but as war paint. And I wore the turquoise scarf. The one he once said looked too bright. Good, let it shine. I arrived early, not out of nerves. I just wanted a moment to breathe. The vineyard was beautiful, I'll admit that. Sunset orange flowers, white chairs lined in perfect symmetry. A violinist playing something delicate. It was the kind of place you dream of saying, I do. And yet, all I could think was, this isn't a wedding, it's a performance, a cover-up with a catered menu. I walked past the guests slowly, and heads turned. Some in confusion, some in discomfort. A few recognized me. I saw the whispers start before I reached the edge of the garden. And then I saw him. Daniel. He froze, wineglass in hand, smile fading, jaw tightening. That split second, that flicker in his eyes, told me everything I needed to know. He didn't think I'd come. He thought I'd disappear quietly, like a good little secret. But here I was. I didn't approach him. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. I took a seat in the back row. Calm. Composed. Unbothered. Let him sweat. Let her wonder. A bridesmaid glanced over her shoulder and whispered something to Melissa. She turned to look. Our eyes met, and for a second, she looked afraid. Not of me, of the truth. Because I was living proof that Daniel's story, their story, had a preface he never told her. And now, that preface had shown up in heels and confidence. The ceremony began. People smiled, vows were read, but I didn't listen. I studied the way he held her hand, the way he looked at her. I'd seen that face before. The one he wears when he's telling you something beautiful right before it breaks you. When it was done, they were announced as husband and wife. Applause erupted, cameras flashed, and I stood up. Not to make a scene, not to expose him, but because I was done sitting quietly at the edge of my own life. I walked out with my head high, heels clicking like punctuation marks against the stone path. I didn't look back, because this time, I wasn't leaving in pieces. I was leaving as a whole. I hadn't planned to speak. I wasn't there to make a scene or steal the spotlight. But sometimes the moment calls you, and when the microphone was offered for a few words from friends and family, I stood up. There was a pause. An audible ripple moved through the room as I made my way to the front. Daniel's face went pale. Melissa stiffened, one hand still resting lightly on his. The wedding planner tried to intercept me with a polite smile. "I'm sorry, are you—" "I won't take long," I said calmly. I stepped up to the mic. I didn't need notes. I had every word etched into my bones. "Hi," I began, scanning the crowd slowly. "Most of you don't know me. That's okay. I wasn't invited as a friend or even as a memory. I was invited by mistake. People shifted uncomfortably. Daniel shot up from his chair, but Melissa gently touched his arm. "Let her speak," she whispered, and so I did. "I'm Claire. I was Daniel's wife for 12 years. Gasps, a few muffled whispers. Daniel stood frozen, his eyes locked on me, unable to look away. We built a life together, a quiet one, honest, I thought. I watched him leave for work every morning, packed his lunches, believed his stories. I trusted him, blindly. My voice didn't crack, not once. I wasn't there to beg or weep. I received this wedding invitation in the mail 2 weeks ago, and I almost stayed silent. But then I realized something. I looked directly at Melissa. Her face was blank, but her eyes were full of questions. This isn't about revenge. This is about truth. Because if he could erase 12 years of marriage without blinking, what makes you think he won't do the same to you? I let the words hang. But I'm not here to stop this wedding. I'm here to mark my ending, not yours. I stepped away from the mic. The room was silent. No one clapped, no one moved, and that's when I smiled. Not out of spite, not out of victory, but out of peace, because the moment I spoke my truth, clearly, fully, without shame, I wasn't broken anymore. I was whole, and he could never take that from me again. I didn't stay to see how it ended. I didn't wait for Melissa to run or for Daniel to spin another story. I walked out of that vineyard with the kind of quiet power I had never known I possessed. The sun was beginning to set, casting gold across the hills. My heels clicked against the stone. My dress caught the wind, and for the first time in months, I felt light. I didn't cry in the car. I didn't scream. I just drove, windows down, music low. A woman on the other side of the fire. The next day, Daniel called. Twice. Left a voicemail. "Claire, we need to talk. What you did, that wasn't fair. You blindsided us." Us. As if I hadn't already been blindsided first. As if I owed him silence. I didn't call back. A few days later, Melissa emailed me. It was short, no greeting, no accusations, just one line, "Thank you for telling me." And that was it. I never heard from her again. Rumors trickled in, from mutual friends, from co-workers. The wedding photos never got posted. Daniel's job interviews dried up. Someone said Melissa went on the honeymoon alone. Someone else said she never came back. I didn't follow up, because the story wasn't theirs anymore. It was mine, and I had no interest in watching him fall. I was too busy rising. I found a new apartment, small, sunny, quiet. I painted the walls myself, picked every piece of furniture with intention. Nothing carried over from the old life, not even the plates. I started freelancing again. Got clients, built a rhythm. Some nights I'd catch myself smiling at the screen, not because of someone's message, but because I liked the woman who was answering it. One afternoon, while reorganizing a shelf, I found the wedding invitation again, the one that started it all. I smiled, and I burned it. No rage, no ceremony, just a quiet goodbye. He wrote a new chapter without me. So I wrote a whole new book. Letting go isn't a single act. It's not one brave night, one powerful speech, or one final goodbye. It's 1,000 quiet moments when you choose yourself over the memory of someone who didn't. It happened slowly. In the space between emails I didn't answer. In the photos I didn't check. In the urge to look him up that I ignored. I let go when I stopped rehearsing the things I never said. When I stopped wishing he'd understand what he did. Because closure isn't something you get from them, it's something you give to yourself. One morning, I walked past a couple holding hands. The man leaned in, kissed the woman's temple, and for a second I flinched. Not from jealousy, but from recognition. I had been her once. And for a long time, I thought I'd never feel that way again. But I didn't feel bitterness. I didn't ache. I just smiled. Because love, real love, doesn't erase you. It sees you. I let go when I stopped telling the story to hurt. When I started telling it to heal. When I realized that surviving wasn't enough. I wanted to thrive. I donated his old books. I changed my number. I blocked his email, not out of spite, but because he no longer had anything to say that could add value to my life. I started leaving my phone in another room at night. I read again, danced again, slept in the middle of the bed, and on a rainy Saturday, I stood in the mirror, ran my hands through my hair, and whispered, "You made it." No one clapped, no audience, no dramatic music, just me and the quiet pride of a woman who rebuilt herself from a place where others expected her to stay broken. That was the day I finally let go. Not of him. He was gone long ago. I let go of the version of me that thought his love defined her. And what I found, waiting on the other side, was freedom. It started with a walk, not some grand revelation, just a slow, aimless walk on a quiet morning. No destination, no one waiting on the other end. For the first time in years, I wasn't rushing to be someone's wife, someone's helper, someone's background. I was just Claire. And that was finally enough. I passed a little bookstore I used to love, the kind with mismatched chairs and handwritten signs. I hadn't been there since before the lies, before the silence between us became normal. I walked in, heart beating faster than I expected. The same woman was behind the counter, still sipping the same tea, still wearing the same thick-rimmed glasses. "It's been a while," she said, without even needing my name. I smiled. Too long, I left with 3 books and a handwritten note in the back of one of them that said, "Welcome back." That night, I opened my laptop and started something new. A blog. Just for me. No audience, no pressure. Just stories. Not about him. Not about revenge. But about reclaiming joy. Redefining strength. I titled the first post, "The Space She Left Behind." I wrote about quiet kitchens, about freedom in silence, about the strange beauty of eating alone and actually tasting your food. People began to read, then to share. Women I'd never met emailed me their own versions of escape, of rediscovery, of finding light again. I wasn't alone anymore. I signed up for a creative writing course. The first assignment was to describe a turning point. I smiled as I wrote. My turning point wasn't when he left. It was when I chose to stop waiting for him to come back. I met new people, not romantically, not yet, but genuinely. People who didn't ask about my ex, who never knew the old version of me, who only knew the woman sitting in front of them now. One of them, a woman named Reese, ran a local non-profit that helped women re-enter the workforce after divorce. She asked if I'd be willing to speak. I said yes. That day, I stood in a room of strangers and told them, "Pain is not the end of your story. It might be the fire, but you are the gold that rises from it." Some cried. One stood up and whispered, "Thank you." But I wasn't there to be thanked. I was there because I finally understood something. The best revenge isn't making him hurt. It's living a life so full, so honest, so deeply yours, that he no longer fits anywhere in it. This wasn't my second chance. This was my first real beginning. It arrived on a Wednesday. No return address. Just my name, written in a handwriting I knew by heart. Daniels. For a moment, I just stared at the envelope, the way you might stare at a ghost standing on your porch. Not terrified, just tired. I made myself a cup of tea before opening it. No trembling hands, no tight throat. I had already survived him. Nothing in that envelope could undo that. Inside was a single sheet of paper, no grand apology, no emotional outpouring, just a few lines written in black ink. I heard you've been telling your side of the story. I just want you to know it wasn't all fake, at least not in the beginning. No signature, no contact info, just that. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so perfectly him. Even now, he couldn't give me the truth. He couldn't take responsibility. Just more ambiguity, more half-truths sewn into something that looked like remorse, but was really fear. Fear that I had moved on without him. And I had. I folded the letter once and tucked it in the back of my journal. Not as a keepsake, as a record, a reminder. Then I opened my laptop and started writing my next blog post. The title came instantly, The Things They Say When They Lose Access. I wrote about the way they circle back, not out of love, but out of habit, about how silence becomes unsettling when they're no longer the center of your world. And I ended it with this. You don't need a final apology to heal. Some doors close without a sound. Some stories don't need a sequel. I hit publish, closed my laptop, and moved on with my day, because I didn't need his permission to be whole. And I sure as hell didn't need his letter to remember who I was becoming. It started with one email. A woman named Rachel, 43, recently divorced. She wrote, Your story helped me leave before I lost more years. Then came another and another. From different cities, different lives. Some were just a sentence. Thank you for making me feel less crazy. Others were pages long, stories of betrayal, silence, resilience. I never expected to become anything more than someone quietly healing, but I had become something else, a mirror, a voice, a beginning for women who hadn't yet found the courage to write their own chapters. The blog grew faster than I could follow. Comments poured in. Journalists reached out. Someone asked if I'd speak at a women's retreat. I almost said no, the old Claire would have. But I wasn't her anymore. I said yes. Standing on that stage, looking out at a sea of women with tired eyes and brave hearts, I felt more powerful than I ever had in my 12 years of marriage. We're not here today because we were weak, I told them. We're here because we finally stopped pretending we had to break quietly. The room went still, and then applause, slow at first, then rising like a wave. Afterward, a woman waited until everyone else had left. She looked at me with tears in her eyes and said, My daughter heard me crying last week. I told her I was just tired, but now I know I can say more. I can tell her the truth, that I'm learning to be strong again. I hugged her, not as a speaker, not as a success story, but as a survivor who knew that pain, and what it took to rise from it. I didn't set out to become a voice, but sometimes when life takes everything, it hands you a microphone instead, and I wasn't afraid to use it, because if even one woman walked away believing she deserved more, then all of it mattered. There was a time when I measured peace by the absence of pain. Now, I measure it by mornings like this. Sunlight spilling across my kitchen table, the smell of fresh coffee, bare feet on cool tiles, a playlist humming softly in the background, a window open letting the breeze in, and nothing to prove to anyone. I don't check his social media anymore. I don't wonder if she stayed. I don't need the ending to their story to validate the beginning of mine. Because I'm no longer waiting to feel like myself again. I am myself. There are plants in my apartment now, ones I keep alive, not because someone else will notice, but because I do. I read more. I laugh louder. I say no when I mean no. And I don't apologize for taking up space. I have friends who check on me, not because they're worried I'll fall apart, but because they like who I've become. And some nights when I sit with a glass of wine and reread old journal entries, I don't feel anger anymore. I feel awe at the woman who walked through betrayal, silence, humiliation, and came out not just breathing, but burning. I don't dream of escape anymore. I dream of places I've never been, of people I haven't met yet, of sunrises on mountain tops and dinners that turn into hours of laughter. Because this isn't a story about what I left behind. It's about what I found when I stopped running, a life that feels like mine, without compromise, without shrinking, without pretending. A life I no longer need to escape from. And that is the happiest ending I could have ever imagined. People often ask how you know when you're healed. They expect a date, a milestone, a moment you wake up and say, it's over. But healing doesn't announce itself. It just slips into the room one morning, wraps itself around your shoulders like a soft sweater, and whispers, you're okay now. It shows up in the little things. When you walk past the restaurant you once cried outside of, and feel nothing but hunger. And when your wedding anniversary comes and goes like a regular Tuesday. When you hear his name and it doesn't own your heartbeat anymore, I still carry her with me, the woman I was, the one who said yes too much, who waited for someone to choose her, not realizing she could choose herself. But she's not my anchor anymore. She's my foundation. Every chapter of pain, every buried scream, every quiet triumph. It's all part of the architecture of the woman I've become. Sometimes I sit on the balcony of my apartment and watch the sunset alone, and it hits me. This isn't loneliness. This is freedom. I don't need a partner to validate my worth. I don't need applause to know I've risen. I don't need revenge to feel powerful. I just need me. Fully, honestly, unapologetically. And if one day love finds me again, real love, honest love, I won't be waiting to be saved. I'll meet it as an equal. As a woman who walked through fire and built a home in the light that followed. So if you're listening to this story, maybe from a place of pain, confusion, or silence, hear this. You are not broken. You are becoming. And one day, when you least expect it, you'll wake up inside a life that feels like peace and realize it was never about getting him back. It was always about getting yourself back. Her broken story ended exactly where mine began.